Hi everyone. We're on a rural road in Northern California tonight, just outside a little seaside hamlet. Thick as milk, the fog clings to the trees as if it were terrified to go. In the distance, the sound of the water is quiet, constant, and low, as if it were waiting. I fog up the glass with my breath. The vehicle has come to a stop. The motor hums. My only child, my son, is looking straight ahead while tapping his fingers on the driving wheel as if he were passing the time at a stop sign. He refuses to even look at me, and when he does, his speech is too cool and collected. You can get off here. Unless you've already lost so much that there isn't much left to take, you probably won't make it through that type of sentence. Please take a time to like the video and subscribe before you settle in, but only if you truly enjoy what I do. Tell me the time and where you're listening from while you're at it. Tonight, let's see how many hearts are still beating. Let's begin tonight after turning off the lights and perhaps turning on the fan to provide a calming sound. I chuckle. I laugh. Of course, I believe he's kidding. Who, after all, does that? Who takes their mother to the outskirts of town and urges her to go after she buried her husband 6 days ago? My old slippers are on. In fact, my husband Leo's slippers. Since the funeral, I have been pacing the house in them. They are not well fitted. They didn't. However, I was unable to wear actual shoes. Not quite yet. Are you serious? I inquire. I sound like I'm testing my voice, as if we're still acting. He turns to face me at that point. I can see he doesn't flinch or blink at that point. As if he were bringing takeout, he just handed me my handbag. He claims that the house and the property are now his. Already, Camille is changing the locks. His wife, Camille, with her stretched plastic grin and her gentle, condescending tone that simultaneously makes everything seem like a blessing and a warning. I blink rapidly as though the situation may improve, or he might smile and explain that it was an error, a miscommunication, or a bad joke. However, he doesn't. I've already opened my door. I scuffed my slippers on the gravel, and the automobile is backing up before I can gather my breath. This is crazy, I say. Not even a tremor in my voice. It's not loud enough for that. You can't just, "Josh, I'm your mom." He doesn't respond, only says behind his back, "It will come to you. You always do." Then he disappears. Just a coat, a pocketbook, and the sound of tires on a damp road curling behind him like smoke. No phone, no suitcase, no plan. I'm not a crier. Then no. I simply stand there with my spine rigid and my back straight. The breeze has a rusty, salty flavor. Like it's attempting to commit my figure to memory. The fog creeps in close, gentle yet heavy. I saw his taillights go out, and 40 years of a life I helped create with them. Here's what my son didn't get, though. He didn't abandon me. He released me. He believed he was throwing me away. Since he doesn't know what I did before his father passed away, he really opened a door he didn't know existed. Leo was buried only 6 days ago. Josh wouldn't look at me, and the grass ate up my heels. That's about all I remember from the funeral. Similar to Ivy choking a fence post, Camille gripped his arm. I recall her whispering just loudly enough for me to hear as she leaned in near the pastor stage. She isn't thinking straight. It's the sorrow. She isn't making sensible choices. I believed at the time that she was attempting to be kind. I assumed she had good intentions. However, as I stand there in the fog, I understand the true nature of that moment. It was a coup's initial step. Leo had entrusted the hospice papers to Josh. I didn't want to put my son through this. That was my self-talk. He was already overburdened. Something more had been smuggled in between the insurance calls and the medical paperwork, but all I wanted was to give Leo respect in his final weeks. Something bearing my name. It was forged. I knew enough to feel the sickness blossom in my chest like fire under ice, but I didn't yet grasp the entire extent. This went beyond simple treachery. Everything was stolen in this case. My spouse, my house, my voice. Leo and I constructed the inn from the ground up using shabby furniture and paint-stained hands. The location that began with a hot plate, 2 bedrooms, and a heap of optimism. Josh had always been witty, too shrewd. He would spot the gaps even as a little youngster. But that cleverness grew fangs when paired with Camille. That woman could weaponize politeness. I started walking. I didn't know where. I just knew I couldn't stand still. Not in that fog, not in those slippers. My knees ached. My mouth was dry. But I walked. Past dripping trees, past mossy fences, past the ghosts of every damn thing I gave up so my son could grow tall. Around mile 4, something settled over me, quiet but firm. They think they've won. They think I'm weak, disposable. But they forgot something. I still have Leo's ledger. I still have the safe deposit box. And most importantly, I still have my name on that deed. I am not dead yet. The mist clung to me like sweat. My legs burned. My breath came shallow. But I didn't stop. Not because I wasn't tired. I was. God, I was. But if I stopped, I'd think. And if I thought, I'd break. I passed under a power line. A crow watched me from above, like it knew, like it understood. I remembered the little notes I used to pack in Josh's lunchbox. You're brave. You're kind. I love you. I'd cut his turkey sandwiches into dinosaurs. I'd read 4 books a night. I even learned how to braid action figures into his hair because he wanted warrior styles. And now I was roadside trash. That boy who used to run into my arms after a nightmare. Gone. Replaced by a man who could toss me out like yesterday's recycling. I don't remember how many miles I walked. 6, maybe more. But when I saw that faded sign for Dora's General, my legs nearly gave out. Dora had been running that little shop since I was a teenager. She used to stock hard candy and newspapers. Now she sold lavender lattes and dog treats shaped like ducks. I pushed open the door. The bell gave a half-hearted jingle. Dora looked up over her readers. "Georgia," she said, her voice sharp with worry. "You look like hell." "I feel like it," I replied, lips too cold to smile. She didn't wait, just came around the counter and wrapped me up before I could argue. What on earth happened? I looked down at my feet. I walked. From where? The junction. She pulled back, eyes wide. "That's 8 damn miles." "6 and change," I muttered. She sat me down, wrapped me in fleece, and put a styrofoam cup of coffee in my hands that steamed like salvation. "Where's Josh?" My throat closed. "Gone." She froze. "What do you mean, gone?" I couldn't answer. "Not yet." She didn't press. She just said, "Rest. I'll make you a sandwich." And I sat there, wrapped in old kindness, with blistered feet and a bleeding pride, and one sentence humming in my head like a prayer. What is love without respect? Dora brought me a sandwich cut diagonally like how my mother used to do. Turkey, a little mustard, 2 pickle chips on the side. She didn't ask if I was hungry. She just handed it to me like that was the next step in keeping someone from falling apart. I took a bite before I even thought about it. The coffee had gone lukewarm, but it tasted more like safety than caffeine. And as I sat there, wrapped in that fleece blanket that smelled faintly of dryer sheets and menthol, something shifted, something subtle, like a tight knot in my chest, loosening just slightly. What is love without respect? I used to think love was the anchor, something strong, something that held you in place during a storm. But you know what anchors do? They drag. They bury themselves deep, and they keep you from moving. Respect. That's the wind in your sails. That's what carries you forward. And I had loved Josh fiercely, fully, like a mother is supposed to. But somewhere along the way, I let him stop respecting me. I let Camille's tight little smiles and her not-so-subtle hints about me slowing down wear me down. I let them take over Leo's medical bills without asking where the checks were going. I told myself it was flexibility. I told myself it was trust. But it wasn't. It was surrender, wrapped in that blanket in Dora's little shop with my feet stinging and my pride bleeding. I finally saw it for what it was. I hadn't been generous. I'd been groomed. Dora offered to drive me somewhere, anywhere. I told her no. I wasn't ready for that kind of kindness. Not yet. I called a cab from her landline, paid cash from the emergency stash Leo made me keep in my purse. He always said a woman should never be caught without a backup plan. Funny how that advice stuck when so much else slipped away. The driver didn't ask questions, just took me up the highway to a small motor lodge with flickering neon and a cracked ice machine. The kind of place truckers sleep when the road ice is over. Not charming, not cozy, but anonymous. I paid in cash, signed a fake last name, and carried my purse tight against my chest like it could keep me warm. When I stepped inside, the room smelled like old lemon cleaner and wood paneling. The comforter was polyester. The light above the nightstand buzzed like it was trying to remember how to glow. I didn't care. I stood in the middle of the room, let the purse slide to the floor, and whispered aloud for the first time since the funeral. "You were right, Leo." And then quieter. Like I was saying, it just did the dust motes in the air. I should have seen this coming. The next morning, I sat on the edge of the stiff motel bed, wrapped in one of those scratchy hotel towels, my fingers tied around a lukewarm cup of coffee from the lobby. My bones ached, but it wasn't just from the walk. I was tired in a way sleep couldn't fix, and that's when a memory came to me uninvited, but not unwelcome. Leo and I our first spring at the inn, the soil still clinging to our nails, our hands sore from hauling stone. We planted 6 rose bushes out front, 2 red, 2 peach, 2 yellow. Leo had said people should smell something sweet when they get out of the car. First impressions matter. That day, the sun had hit the silver in his hair just right. He was laughing. Josh was little then 7 maybe, chasing a green ball across the lawn, hiccuping from how hard he was laughing. It had been a good day, a perfect day if I'm honest. And now, here I was sitting in a motel that looked like it forgot what decade it was built in, remembering how we used to dream. The fog hadn't lifted outside, still heavy, still clinging to the windows like breath. But there was more light now, a shift in the gray. Not hope exactly, but something. I found a takeout menu in the drawer, a Bible too, and a pack of matches from a local auto shop. I didn't need them. I just held them in my hand for a while, trying to remember the last time I felt this anonymous. I'd spent 4 decades of my life as the face of something. Greeting guests, baking muffins at dawn, folding fresh towels with lavender sachets, scribbling welcome notes by hand. A life in motion. Now, stillness, and the silence. It wasn't loud. It was patient, like it had been waiting. Later that afternoon, I walked again, slower this time, more deliberate. There was a park just up the road, half gravel, half dying grass. 2 picnic tables, 1 swing set that looked like it had given up. A young mom was trying to stuff her toddler into a puffy coat. She looked bone-tired, the kind of tired I remember. I used to sing Josh to sleep when nothing else worked, made up lullabies about dragons who just wanted quiet caves and soft blankets. He'd curl into me, fingers in my hair, trusting that I could fix whatever was broken. Where did that boy go? Back in the motel, I found my journal buried deep in my purse. A leather one Leo gave me 2 Christmases ago. Still smelled like cedar and ink. I flipped through the pages until I found the last thing he ever wrote. a sticky note tucked between the sheets. Don't let them push you aside. You still have your name on the deed. His handwriting, shaky but sure. His last message to me before everything went dark. And just like that, it felt like a flare in the dark. He knew. Even as he was dying, he saw it coming. Maybe I did too. Maybe I just didn't want to name it. But now it had a name. Betrayal. And it had a face. Josh's. That night, I didn't cry, but I did lay in that motel bed, staring at the water stain on and whispering to the stillness, I miss you, Leo. And after a long pause, I think I'm finally ready to do what you told me to do, because it wasn't just one moment that warned me. It was hundreds, soft, subtle, easy to overlook. The way Josh stopped calling unless something needed fixing. The way Camille said, you must be tired, like it was a gentle suggestion when it was really a leash. The way she stopped calling me Mom, started calling me Georgia. The name shift hurt more than I ever admitted. Not because it was cold, but because it was intentional. Thanksgiving. The last one before Leo died. I brought out the wedding china ivory with gold rims. Camille said, maybe next year we should do paper plates. Less fuss for you. I laughed, thought she was kidding. She wasn't. That night, Josh told me I made too much food, that it made Camille feel pressured by mashed potatoes. I had made Camille's favorite corn souffle. She didn't touch it. Brought store-bought cookies to Christmas that year, still in the plastic tray. And I said, thank you. I said it with a smile, because I was still pretending. Not anymore. The night after I found Leo's note, the one about the deed, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was scared. That part had burned off like morning fog. No, I was restless in the different way. Like something had finally clicked into place. Like my bones remembered they were still mine. I stared at the motel ceiling, heart beating slow and even, and started making a list in my head. Not a list of heartbreaks. Not this time. A list of evidence. Because people love to talk about betrayal like it's a sudden slap across the face. But mine? Mine came like water rising in a basement, inch by inch. Until you look down and realize your ankles are wet. Then your knees. Then your whole damn life's underwater. And you're still standing there trying to convince yourself it's just a leak. I started with the last time Josh offered to handle something. It was after Leo's diagnosis. Stage 3, prostate cancer. I was drowning in paperwork and grief. And Josh. He stepped in, all warm smile and soft tone. Let me take care of the bills, Mom. I'll simplify everything. Keep it organized. He looked so sincere. I wanted so badly to believe it was love. But the hospice invoice didn't add up. The bank statements didn't line up. When I asked about the receipts, he smiled, but his eyes didn't. Don't worry about it, he said. It's taken care of. And it was. Just not by him. Camille used to offer me tea every time I visited. That stopped too. Then it became, we're just finishing lunch, or the kids are napping, or now's not a great time. So I started calling first. Asking permission, basically. Then I was told to stop dropping by. Then they started saying they'd come to me. And then they stopped coming altogether, from weekly visits to monthly, from monthly to maybe next month. I adjusted, and adjusted again, until I realized I was the only one doing the adjusting. The week after Leo's funeral, I asked Josh if he wanted to go through the workshop. Leo's tools, his compass, the notebooks he kept from the early days of the inn. Josh waved it off, too swamped. Camille just smiled and said, Don't worry, Georgia. We'll take care of it eventually. Take care of it, like garbage, like a box of old receipts. And I just nodded, like a fool. But the worst, the part that nearly cracked me open, was the business cards, new stack, glossy, fresh logo, no more lighthouse. The lighthouse had been my symbol, my family crest. Now it was a cursive J in gold foil, like we were a five-star spa, and not a humble inn built from scraped paint. And Leo's busted back. Josh's name was there, Camille's too. Mine. Gone. Not even a co-founder. Not even an in memory of. Just erased. I found one of the cards in the foyer and stood there holding it like a death certificate. And still. I didn't say anything. I went into the kitchen and folded laundry, like a maid in my own home. That night in the motel, I pulled out a notebook from my purse, one I used to track grocery totals and linen deliveries, and I wrote down every moment I'd swallowed my questions, every time I let something slide, every time I pretended their silence was stress, not strategy. 4 full pages, not of complaints, of evidence. People talk about the frog in boiling water, how it doesn't realize it's being cooked until it's too late. Well, I was the frog, and they turned up the heat 1 sweet smiling degree at a time. The next morning, I made a call I'd been putting off. Colleen, my sister's daughter, 38, maybe 39, 2 kids. Husband sells insurance. I don't know. We weren't especially close, but she used to send Christmas cards with glitter and little scribbled notes in the margins. She'd sent a bouquet when Leo passed. A card that said, "Let me know if you need anything." So I called. It rang 6 times before she picked up. "Hello, Colleen? It's Aunt Georgia." A pause. "Oh, hi, gosh, it's been a while. How are you?" That pause, that little shift in tone. It settled in my stomach like a stone. "I'm hanging in. Actually, I could use a favor. Nothing huge." "Oh." Her voice was tight, not cold, just carefully distant. "I'm not at home right now. Things have come up. I just need somewhere to stay for a few days. To think." I twisted the motel phone cord around my fingers as if that could soften the ask. You know, just a bit of space. Colleen was quiet. I heard dishes in the background, a TV, life moving on. Aunt Georgia. It's not that I don't want to help. It's just, things are kind of crazy. Kevin's working double shifts. Ava's got dance. And the guest room is full of storage right now, so. I nodded, though she couldn't see it. "It's all right. I understand." Another pause. "Have you tried calling Josh?" There it was. The part where I was supposed to go back to the person who pushed me off the boat and ask for a life vest. "I'm sure he didn't mean whatever happened," she added gently. "Of course not. No one ever means it, until they do." I made one more call that morning, to Camille's mother. Her name's Deborah, always polite, always dry as toast. She picked up on the second ring. "Georgia," she said slowly, like she was searching for the script. "Deborah, I hope I'm not calling at a bad time." "Oh well, we're just finishing brunch. Can I call you back?" "I won't keep you long," I said, even though I was already shrinking inside. "I just wanted to ask if you've spoken with Camille or Josh." A pause. Then we heard there was tension, that perhaps you were stepping back, letting them lead. Letting them lead. It sounded so diplomatic, so smooth, like I'd been erased in the passive voice. I didn't step back. I said quietly, "I was pushed." Another sigh. "You've had a hard year, Georgia. Losing Leo, the business, the stress. Perhaps it's time to rest. Josh is very capable of what I thought." But I didn't say it. I just said, "Thank you for your honesty." She replied, "You're in our thoughts like a priest delivering a eulogy." I hung up before she could say goodbye. So that was 2 calls. 2 doors closed, no shelter, no solidarity. Everyone I reached for was busy straightening their place settings. I walked to the diner down the block. One of those places with sticky menus and sun-faded ketchup bottles. The waitress called me Han, brought me grilled cheese and tomato soup without judgment. She handed me extra oyster crackers. Didn't know it, but she kept me from crying. Back in the motel, I sat on the bed eyes on the ceiling fan spinning in slow, lazy circles. They wanted me to rest. So I would. I would rest. I would wait. And when the time came, I would wake up. And they wouldn't like what came next. 2 days passed at the motel. Long, quiet days. The kind where time feels like it's passing you sideways. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I planned. Because the difference between heartbreak and strategy is just a matter of what you do with the silence. On the third morning, I walked into town and stopped at the local library. The woman behind the desk looked like she could sniff out overdue books through brick walls. But she smiled when I asked for a guest pass. "Need the internet?" she asked, already sliding over the clipboard. "Just a few hours," I said. She nodded. "Printouts are 10 cents a page." I thanked her and sat at a public desktop computer from the Obama-era hands poised over the sticky keyboard. And then I got to work. First, the county clerk's website. I typed in the N's address heart, pounding harder than it had any right to. Property records. There it was, our names. Leo and me, still there, still co-owners. I leaned back, fingers trembling. They hadn't filed the transfer yet. Josh and Camille had lied. Again. The deed was still ours. Well, mine now? That moment. That was the first inhale I'd had since the funeral that didn't taste like ash. Then I logged into the bank account Leo and I had opened together for emergency renovations. The one we never used because we were always scraping by. But Leo had insisted on setting aside something just in case. I still had the password. Still had access. Balance. 47,93312. I nearly laughed out loud in that hushed library. Leo, you sly old fox. They didn't know about this account. They'd never even thought to look. They thought I was flat broke. I printed out the property record, the bank statement, the email from Leo's attorney. Yes, I still had access to that too. I highlighted my name on every page like I was prepping for a trial. Because in a way, I was. Back at the motel, I spread everything across the bed. Legal documents, bank balances, a list of former guests who had written glowing online reviews of me by name. Because that's what Josh and Camille never understood. The inn wasn't built on crown molding or throw pillows. It was built on me, my hands, my name, my work. They could polish the floors, repaint the walls, rebrand the logo, but they couldn't erase the truth. That night, I slept better than I had in months. And when I woke up the next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I made a to-do list just for me, not for Leo, not for guests, not for Josh, just me. First on the list, talk to Patty D'Angelo. She used to run the local newspaper before it folded. Sharp as glass, always had a camera hanging from her neck and a knack for smelling trouble. I hadn't seen her since Leo's memorial, where she'd pulled me aside and said, "If those two start sniffing around the inn, call me." I thought she was being dramatic. Turns out she was just early. She met me at the diner, same booth I'd been haunting all week. Still sticky. Still familiar. Patty slid into the seat across from me, still wearing the same cracked leather jacket she'd worn since 1998. Her gray hair was pulled back in a pencil. Tell me everything, she said, no small talk. So I did. Not all at once. Not crying. Not whispering. I told it like a story. Scene by scene. Josh. The fog. The car door slamming shut. The cold. The motel. The calls. The silence. Her eyes narrowed. Her fingers tapped the table. When I showed her the printouts, the deed, the bank balance, the lawyer's email, she let out a low whistle. "Well," she said, "they picked the wrong old bird to peck at." I smiled. First real smile in days. "Think you can help?" She grinned. "Georgia. I've been waiting for someone to burn this town's hypocrisy to the ground since 2003. We made a plan. Not a lawsuit? Not yet. Something quieter, smarter. Something Camille wouldn't see coming. Because she'd expect lawyers, tears, maybe some passive-aggressive Facebook posts. What she wouldn't expect. A woman with receipts, allies, and a second act. Patty helped me draft a letter. Elegant, legally sound, clear, to whom it may concern. As co-owner and named party on the deed to property address, I am formally notifying all involved that any changes to the structure, business practices, or ownership of the property, without my explicit written consent, will be considered a breach of contract and subject to legal action. Sincerely, Georgia Lane. Simple, unmistakable, a reminder that I hadn't disappeared. We made copies, mailed one to Josh, one to Camille, one to their business email, and one to their lawyer, because of course they had one. Then we waited. 3 days later, I got a reply. Not from Josh, from Camille. Typed, cold. Dear Georgia, we're disappointed you've chosen to pursue this path, especially after the emotional strain of recent months. However, we respect your autonomy and will comply with your request pending further discussions. Please let us know how you wish to proceed. Best, Camille. No apology, no explanation, just a warning in polite clothing. But what she didn't know, I wasn't scared anymore, because I'd remembered something important. Camille might be good at power plays, but I'm better at people. And I had one more ace up my sleeve: the guests, the regulars, the people who came back year after year because of the way I folded towels, or remembered anniversaries, or baked apple scones with extra cinnamon because one kid said it reminded him of his grandma. So I opened a new email, made a fresh account, typed, Dear friends of the Lane Inn, you may have noticed some changes lately. I wanted to reach out personally and say thank you for every kind word, every story you shared, every late night tea on the porch. I am still here, and I'm building something new. If you'd like to be part of it, stay tuned. Love, Georgia. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't burning things down, it's building something they can't touch. The email went out on a Thursday. By Friday morning, I had 12 replies. By Sunday, I had 73. Some were short, simple, we miss you. My kids still talk about your blueberry pancakes. We knew something felt off. Some were long. One came from a couple who had gotten engaged on our back porch the summer before Leo's diagnosis. They told me they'd come back this spring and were shocked I wasn't there. I asked Camille where you were. The wife wrote. She said you'd retired. But it didn't feel right. You don't strike me as someone who just stops. I read that sentence twice. And then again. You don't strike me as someone who just stops. They were right. I took a bus out of town just a few hours away to the coast, where Leo and I once dreamed of opening a second inn. It was just a fantasy back then. Something we joked about while drinking cheap wine and watching old Bob Ross reruns on a busted TV. But I remembered the name we'd scribbled on a napkin. The Second Wind. Leo said it sounded like both a breeze and a comeback. I kept that napkin in my wallet for 12 years. Still had it. The town I landed in was quiet. 2 bookstores, a coffee shop with a crooked sign, a harbor filled with boats that looked like they'd seen things. It wasn't glamorous, but it was possible. And that's what I needed. Not comfort, not revenge, possibility. I walked up and down the main road with a paper notebook jotting down for lease signs. Nothing fancy. Just places with good light and maybe enough space for 2 guest rooms and a kitchenette. By the end of the day, I had 3 addresses circled. By the end of the week, I had a key. It was a rundown cottage, beige with peeling trim, floors that creaked like they were telling secrets. But it had charm, a garden that could be brought back to life, a bay window just right for a reading nook. I stood in the middle of that dust-covered living room and whispered, "We're doing it, Leo." No answer, but I swear the breeze through the broken screen door smelled like yes. Back in the motel, I packed up my things. Dora had already heard the news. Apparently, Patty's niece was faster than gossip itself. When I stopped by to say goodbye, Dora handed me a paper bag filled with scones, tea packets, and a flask. "For the stress," she said. I hugged her tighter than I meant to. She just patted my back and whispered, "You'll outlast them, Georgia. You always do." Before I left town, I mailed one more letter, handwritten, no copies. "Dear Josh, when you were born, I was afraid of dropping you. I used to hold you while you slept, just to be sure your chest kept rising. I made mistakes. I know that. Maybe I gave too much. Maybe I didn't ask enough of you. But I never thought you'd drop me. I hope you figure out who you are without trying to erase me. Your mother, Georgia. P.S. The deed is still in my name. The new cottage didn't have furniture, so I slept on an air mattress for a while, made do with a camping stove and cold cereal. But each morning, I swept a little more dust, scrubbed a little more baseboard, painted a little more trim, and every night, I wrote back to more guests. I told them I wasn't gone, just changing zip codes. One couple sent me a check for $500. "To help you get started," they wrote. "Your kindness helped us during our divorce. You gave us peace when we couldn't find it anywhere else." I cried over that one, not because of the money, but because they saw me. Word spread, not fast, but steady. I set up a website. I called it The Second Wind, just like the napkin, just like the dream. I uploaded a few old photos, sunlight on the porch at the old inn, a close-up of Leo laughing in the garden, me holding a pie. I started taking reservations. Nothing fancy. No room service. No spa. Just a clean bed, a pot of tea, and a handwritten note on the nightstand. The way it used to be. The way it was meant to be. Camille sent me one more email. Subject line clarification. Georgia. "We understand you've relocated and are making alternative arrangements. While we appreciate your contributions to the Lane Inn, we believe it's best for everyone to move forward independently. Josh hopes you find peace and happiness. Best, Camille." No apology, no acknowledgement of what they did. But I didn't need it, because here's what I've learned. You don't need someone to admit they hurt you in order to heal. You just need to stop bleeding for them. The first guest at the Second Wind arrived on a Tuesday. A woman in her 60s, traveling alone, divorced, recently retired. She brought a small suitcase and eyes full of caution. I welcomed her with tea and asked about her journey. She said, "I've been trying to find myself again." I smiled. "You're not lost," I told her. "You're just between chapters." That night, I tucked a note under her teacup before bed. It said, "You are not broken. You are rebuilding." And that is a very brave thing to do. Because maybe that's what I am now. Not just a woman discarded. Not just a mother betrayed. Not even just an innkeeper. Maybe I'm a place where people come to remember who they are. Maybe I'm finally home. The Second Wind had no official ribbon-cutting ceremony. No mayor, no press. Just me, a borrowed broom, and an old welcome mat from the back of Dora's shop that said, "Come in, we're open, mostly." But when that first guest left, she hugged me so tightly, I felt my ribs shift. She whispered, "You gave me more than rest. You gave me space." That night, I stood on the porch with a chipped mug of peppermint tea, watching the waves in the distance under a silver moon. And I realized I had given that space to myself first. The next few weeks passed like a slow sunrise, gradual but sure. I mended curtains, stitched pillowcases from old linens, used lemon and baking soda to scrub the old copper sink until it almost glowed. Each task stitched me back together. Not into the woman I was, into someone wiser, harder to uproot. Because when you've been discarded, when the people you love most treat you like a burden, you have two choices: break or build again. And I had chosen to build. Reservations trickled in. One night, a young couple on a last-chance trip. They ate in silence the first night, crying quietly the next morning over coffee. I gave them space, refilled the pot. Let the silence be a kindness, not a punishment. When they left a note. Thank you for the soft place to fall. Another guest, Jenna 51 artist, recently lost her mother. She stayed a week, painted on the porch barefoot, tea in hand. On her last night, she asked if she could leave something behind. She handed me a canvas. It was a watercolor of the bay window at sunrise. My silhouette in the chair, holding a book. She wrote on the back, "Thank you for reminding me that women don't expire." Every now and then, I'd hear from someone back in my old town. Whispers. Camille trying to hire staff she couldn't afford. Reviews about the new inn being cold or too corporate. Guests mentioning how something feels off. I didn't gloat, because I knew now I had never been just a name on the paperwork. I was the soul of that place, and they had tried to steal it without ever understanding it. One evening, Patty came to visit. She brought a box of muffins and a stack of small-town gossip hot enough to boil tea. Did you hear she said grinning? Camille tried to trademark the Lane Inn logo. Turns out Leo already registered it. Under your name. She raised her eyebrows at me. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped the muffins. Apparently, Leo had done more behind my back than I realized. That man had been quietly securing my legacy when I thought we were just folding towels and going to doctor's appointments. Even in death, he was looking out for me. But not all news was good. One day, I got a letter. No return address. But the handwriting made my heart ache. Josh. He didn't call, didn't email. Just this. Mom, I don't know what I thought I was doing. I don't know what Camille told you. I just know I miss you. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything. Josh, it was short. No specifics. No accountability. But it was a crack. A fissure in the wall between us. And it hurt to read. Not because I wasn't grateful, but because it came too late to unmake the damage. I sat on the porch for a long time after that, holding the letter, remembering the little boy who used to curl into me during storms. The boy who once said, "I want to marry you when I grow up because you make the best mac and cheese." That boy was gone. The man who'd taken his place had buried me with a smile, and now he wanted resurrection. I didn't write back. Not yet. Because forgiveness, that's not a switch. It's a bridge. And he hasn't even stepped on it yet. But here's the part I hadn't expected. I wasn't angry anymore. Not in that sharp, cutting way. What I felt was distance. Space between me and the pain. And in that space, something new had taken root. Freedom. Not because I'd forgotten, but because I'd outgrown the prison they tried to build around me. One night, I went out to the garden behind the cottage. I'd cleared the weeds, turned the soil, and I planted 3 rose bushes. 1 red, 1 peach, 1 yellow. Like the ones Leo and I planted at the old inn all those years ago. It was my way of saying I'm still here, and I remember. In the morning, a guest left a little envelope under her pillow. Inside a note. I came here to rest. I left ready to begin again. Thank you for showing me how. So if you're listening to this and someone's told you you're too old, too broken, too late, I want you to hear me. You are not finished. You are not a phase someone outgrows. You are not furniture to be donated or packed up or pushed aside. You are a chapter still being written. And maybe your best lines are still ahead of you. The second wind still only has 2 rooms. I still fold the towels myself. I still write notes on the nightstand with a pen that leaks a little when it's cold. And every guest who walks through my door, I welcome them. Like I'm welcoming back a piece of myself. Because I know now. The home I was trying to build for my family. I finally built it for myself. Somewhere between scrubbing grout and answering emails from strangers who felt like old friends, I realized something I hadn't let myself say out loud. I'm happy. Not performatively. Not the kind of happy you fake through tight smiles and polite thank you cards, but a quiet, grounded happiness, the kind that grows when you stop asking, "What did I do wrong?" and start asking, "What do I want next?" The second wind became a rhythm. Mornings were for sunlight and fresh tea, soft footsteps, the smell of warm muffins rising from the old oven like forgiveness. Afternoons were quieter, a breeze through the garden, a knock on the door, a woman in her 40s asking if she could paint by the window, a retired teacher offering to help fold laundry just to keep her hands busy. Evenings. That's when the stories came. People opened up in the dark. There was something about the soft lamplight, the slow music from the record player Leo and I found at a flea market once it invited honesty, grief, divorce, estrangement, reinvention. It poured out like soup into chipped bowls. And I listened, not to fix, just to witness. One guest, a man in his late 50s, told me he hadn't cried since his daughter stopped speaking to him. 12 years, he said. Not one tear, until I sat on your porch. He cried for 10 minutes, didn't apologize once. I just handed him a blanket. He left the next morning with red eyes and a smile, said he'd be back in spring. I didn't advertise the second wind. Not really. No ads, no SEO, no influencers, just word of mouth. One hurting soul telling another, "Go there, she'll see you." And I did, because I knew what it meant to be invisible in your own life. One chilly morning, I woke to a thump at the door. A box, no note. Just my name in Josh's handwriting. I carried it inside slow, opened it with a butter knife heart caught between hope and dread. Inside, my wedding china, wrapped in Leo's old sweaters. One cup was cracked, but the rest intact. Below it all, below, a single Polaroid of the three of us. Me, Leo, and Josh at the inn. He couldn't have been more than 12. Grinning. A piece of pie in his hand, whipped cream on his nose. On the back, an ink that looked newer than the photo. I'm not ready to talk yet, but I'm listening now. I held that picture to my chest and sat on the floor of my kitchen. Didn't cry, didn't call, just whispered, "It's a start." Because that's what grief is too. A start of something different, maybe even something better, if you let it. Patty called one afternoon and said, "You've got a wait list now." Apparently her niece, who helps at a local booking site, had been getting emails from folks asking if the second wind was that place with the woman who writes notes. "Your legend's growing," Patty teased. "You're becoming an urban myth." I laughed. "All I'm doing is being kind." She said, "That's the rarest myth of all." I didn't think I'd ever feel proud again. After everything, after being cast out by my own blood left on a roadside like an old coat no one wanted, I thought pride was dead. But one night, sitting by the fire pit, a guest leaned over and said, "You're the most alive person I've ever met." And just like that, I felt it again. That spark. Not in spite of what happened to me, but because I'd chosen to survive it with grace and fire. I keep a drawer in the desk near the bay window. Inside it, I've started saving little things. Notes from guests, drawings, a dried rose from the garden, a napkin with Leo's handwriting that says, "Slow down, you're doing fine." I call it my proof drawer. Proof that I still matter. Proof that even when people walk away, your life doesn't end. It just gets quieter for a while, until you remember how to hear yourself again. The truth is, I miss my son. I probably always will. But I don't miss the woman I had to be to stay close to him, the version of me that folded herself smaller every year just to fit into their picture of what I should be. That woman's gone now. She's been replaced by someone stronger, softer too, but steel in the spine. Someone who knows that peace isn't about who stays. It's about who you become when they leave. Last night, I stood in the garden at dusk. The roses are blooming again, full, rich, and fragrant. A guest walked by and said, "They smell like home." I smiled. They are, I said, and I meant it. Because what I lost, it made room for everything I'm building now. And if you're listening to this thinking you've been thrown away, I want you to hear me loud and clear. You're not trash. You're soil. And something is going to grow from this. Something wild and soft and entirely yours. Just wait. It's coming. There's something I've learned about beginnings. They don't start the moment the pain ends. They start when you choose to stop explaining your hurt to people who don't want to understand it. That choice. That's where power begins again. I'd stopped telling my story to people who tilted their heads and said things like, "But he's your son," or worse. "Are you sure you didn't do something to push them away?" Let me be clear. I did everything I could to stay. They just left faster than I could follow. The thing about losing your family, your name in someone's mouth, the place you held in a home you built, it doesn't break all at once. It erodes. Little things. Camille moving your favorite teacups to a higher shelf. Josh laughing at your memory like it was just an exaggeration. A dinner invitation that turns into, "Actually, we'll just pick up something on the way back." You don't notice the exit signs when they look like gestures. But now, I see every step they took. And I'm not chasing anymore. I was sweeping the front steps of the second wind one morning when a car pulled up. Rental, silver, clean enough to be nervous. A woman stepped out, mid-60s, worn blazer, smart shoes, that look women get when they've lived a little too much life and not enough kindness. She stood by the gate and said, "Are you Georgia?" I nodded. "Yes." She smiled tightly. "I'm Rachel. I think my daughter stayed here last month." My brain clicked. The artist. Jenna. "She did," I said. "Lovely woman." Rachel exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for a year. "She came home softer," she said. Not fixed, but softer. I didn't know where she'd been, just said it was a place that let her feel like a person again. I opened the gate. "Come in." Rachel stayed 3 nights. We didn't talk much. She mostly sat in the garden, watched the wind stir the roses, and stared into her tea like it might answer something. Before she left, she hugged me hard. The kind of hug that says thank you, and I'm sorry, and I wish I'd found this sooner. She left an envelope on the nightstand, inside a check, too generous, and a note. "I couldn't fix her, but you gave her back to herself. That's more than I ever could." I sat with that one a long time, because once that had been me, waiting for someone to come home to themselves, only to realize they weren't planning to. A few days later, I got a voicemail. Josh. His voice was raspy, hesitant. "I don't know why I'm calling. Maybe because I drove past the inn today. Your roses are gone. Camille paved it over. Said the guests wanted more parking. I didn't know she'd do that. I miss you. I'm sorry, Mom." I listened once, then deleted it. Not out of spite. Just because I don't need apologies soaked in surprise anymore. Camille didn't erase those roses. Josh let her. There's something people forget when they talk about betrayal. It's not just the act. It's the silence around it. The way no one stopped it. The way no one asked you if you were okay when they watched it happen. I would have forgiven 1,000 things if he had just once looked at me and said, "This isn't right." But he didn't. He walked away. And now, he has to live with the fact that I built something better without him. I walk through the second wind at night sometimes, check the locks, turn off lights, and I whisper, "Thank you," to the walls, the air, the silence, to Leo, to myself, because I've learned that healing doesn't always feel like sunlight and laughter. Sometimes it feels like walking past a mirror and liking who you see again. One morning, I found a letter slid under the door. No stamp, just my name on the outside. Inside, you saved me. And I don't even think you knew it. I was going to leave this world. Then I found your story. Then I came here, and now I want to live long enough to become someone kind. Thank you, Elle. No return address, no signature beyond that single letter. But I sat down on the steps and held that paper like it was something sacred. Because it was. That letter. That was everything they tried to tell me I wasn't worth. And now it was mine. I have a shelf in this guest room now, lined with little tokens people leave behind. A painted rock, a pressed flower, a key from a broken apartment in Philadelphia. People leave pieces of their past like offerings. And I honor them all, because I know what it's like to carry something too long and finally set it down. Camille tried to send me a cease and desist once, something about using the Lane family branding. Patty sent her a reply on my behalf, 3 pages long, with receipts, deeds, dated guest books, and a photo of the original Lane Inn sign with my handwriting on it. I never heard from Camille again, but someone told me she cried when she saw my name in ink on that deed. Good. She should cry, not because I want her pain, but because it might be the first real thing she's ever felt. The last time I looked at the old inn online, it was up for sale. Empty, cold, furnished, but unloved. A polished grave. And I didn't feel triumph. I felt freedom. Because that place, it's not mine anymore. My story doesn't live in those walls. It lives here, in the soft clink of teacups, in the hush of the roses, in the laughter of 2 strangers becoming friends in the kitchen. In me. So if you've been cast out, if someone said you were done too old, too much, too soft, too angry, if they threw you away and expected you to disappear, hear this. You are not gone. You are gathering. And what you build next, they won't even know how to name it. I've come to believe that silence has a sound. It's not empty. It breathes. It holds memory, regret, peace. A kind of low hum beneath the ribs that says, "You're still here." I used to hate silence. It meant waiting for a voice that never came, a text that didn't buzz, a footstep on the stairs that wasn't coming back. But now silence feels like space. Room to breathe, room to be. I was sitting on the porch with a guest named Tanya, a nurse from Oregon who'd taken 6 months off after losing her mother. She was telling me how the world doesn't stop just because you're grieving. They hand you the urn and your shift starts at 6 a.m. the next morning, she said. No one asked if you've slept. I nodded. Grief doesn't come with PTO. She laughed. A wet, tired laugh. The kind that comes out sideways. I just needed somewhere to sit without fixing anything. Well, I said, pouring her more tea. You found it. She looked at me then. Really looked. Georgia, she asked, don't you ever get lonely? I stirred my cup. Then I said, not like I used to. Loneliness before was sitting at a dinner table with people who looked at their phones instead of at you. Loneliness was making small talk with your daughter-in-law and realizing she already decided you didn't belong. Now my solitude has shape. It's not the absence of love. It's the presence of self. I like my own company. That's not something I could have said a year ago. One day, a young woman arrived at the gate with a camera slung around her neck. Late 20s. Nervous hands. I don't have a reservation, she said. But I heard this place helps people. I smiled. We have room. She stayed in the small room upstairs, the one with the mismatched quilt and the sea glass lamp. She barely spoke the first night. Second night, she came down and asked if she could photograph the roses. Third night, she sat across from me on the porch and said I left an engagement. I didn't know where to go. I said, sometimes the first place you land is the one you are always heading toward. She blinked back tears. Said, my name's Morgan. She ended up staying 2 weeks. Before she left, she handed me an envelope. Inside a series of photos she'd taken of the second wind, But they weren't just of the rooms or the garden. They were of me. Candid shots. Me laughing with a guest. Me hanging linens on the line. Me walking barefoot through the dewy grass at sunrise. At the bottom of one, she'd written in neat block letters, "This is what home looks like." I pinned that photo to the corkboard in the kitchen because I used to think home was something you created for others. Now I know it's something you reclaim for yourself. There's a rhythm to this place now. Not perfect, not polished, but honest. People come with their broken pieces, and we don't fix them. We just hold space while they begin again. It's not about healing all at once. It's about remembering you can. Josh called again. I didn't answer. He left a message. I drove by your place. The new one. It's beautiful. I don't know how you did it, Mom. I hope you're happy. I really, truly do. He sounded small. Not sorry enough, but maybe starting. It didn't make me cry. It didn't make me anything, really. Just reminded me that time doesn't heal all wounds, but distance can keep you from reopening them. The thing is, I still love him. Love doesn't die when someone betrays you. It just changes shape, becomes quieter, becomes yours alone. One rainy morning, I found a box of letters on the porch. No return address. Inside, old guest notes. Ones from the Lane Inn. Ones I thought Camille had thrown out. But here they were. Dozens of them. All addressed to me. All in different handwriting. Thank you for listening. You reminded me of my grandmother. We'll never forget how you made us feel welcome. I sat cross-legged on the floor and read every single one. Then I made tea. Then I wrote back to every return address I could find. Just a simple note. Still here, still grateful, always will be. Georgia. The second wind isn't just an inn anymore. It's a marker. A lighthouse even if there's no water nearby. For people finding their way back to themselves. And for me, it's proof. Proof that even when the people you raised forget you, even when the ones you loved most try to erase you, you can build again, better, softer, more fiercely yours. Sometimes I wonder if Leo would recognize me now, not just in appearance, but in spirit. I think he would. I think he'd smile that crooked grin of his and say, "There she is." Because for a long time I was surviving. Now I'm living. And no one, not Josh, not Camille, not even my own fear gets to take that from me. Not ever again. The first holiday season at the second wind snuck up on me. I didn't plan anything extravagant. No garlands strung across the porch. No flashing lights. Just a wreath I made with rosemary from the garden and a bowl of oranges in the front hall. And yet something about it felt more sacred than any Christmas I'd hosted before. It wasn't about the sparkle. It was about presence. About waking up to quiet joy and finding that was enough. A guest named Malcolm checked in on December 22nd. Mid-40s, tall, shaky hands. Told me he was just passing through, which is what people say when they're hoping you won't ask what they're really running from. I didn't ask. I just handed him a mug of cider and said, "We don't do passing through here. We do stopping, staying, breathing." He looked at me like I'd offered him a map to somewhere he thought no longer existed. He stayed 5 nights. On Christmas morning, I put out a plate of cinnamon rolls. Just 2, enough for whoever wandered in first. By 8 a.m., 6 guests were sitting in the kitchen in their pajamas, sipping coffee and trading stories about old dogs, burnt turkeys, and the weird comfort of being far from forced traditions. Malcolm said it was the first Christmas in 10 years he hadn't spent in a hotel bar. I watched them all, strangers turned quiet companions, and felt a heat in my chest that had nothing to do with the oven. This, I thought. This is what they tried to take from me. And yet here it was, growing again. After breakfast, I walked to the edge of the property where I'd planted a small evergreen sapling. Leo always wanted a real Christmas tree in the yard. I couldn't give him that when he was alive. but I'd given it to him now. I hung one silver bell from its highest branch. It tinkled in the wind like a secret. That afternoon, a FedEx truck pulled up. I wasn't expecting anything. The driver handed me a small box. No note. But the sender address was from Josh. Inside a music box. Wooden. Hand-carved. One Leo had bought at a flea market the year Josh turned 12. It used to sit on our bedroom dresser. I thought it was lost. Maybe sold. Maybe tossed. But here it was. I turned the crank slowly. It played Moon River. I sat on the floor with it in my lap, listening until the music ran out. Then I put it on the nightstand beside my bed, not as a sign of forgiveness, but as a memory that now belonged entirely to me. People ask me sometimes, quietly, carefully, if I'll ever reconcile with Josh. I tell them the truth. I don't know. Because love doesn't make betrayal disappear. It just means you grieve what could have been, and then decide how you want to live with what actually is. I'm still deciding. And that's okay. By January, the second wind had a 6-month wait list. Patty called to say a travel blog had featured it after someone posted a photo of our garden and tagged it the place where I learned how to exhale again. I didn't even know what a tag was until then. But it didn't matter. What mattered was that people were coming. Not because of clever branding, but because of what they'd heard from someone who needed what I offer. Not amenities, not perfection, permission, to rest, to feel, to be real. One afternoon in February, I found a young man standing at the edge of the rose garden. Jeans, flannel, posture like apology. He turned when he heard my footsteps. Josh. He looked older, softer. Eyes rimmed with a kind of grief I recognized. We stood there for a full minute. No words. Then he said, "I didn't come to fix anything. I just wanted to see if you were as okay as people say you are." I nodded. "I am." Another pause. "I'm glad," he said. "I really am." He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I've been going to therapy. They say I should write more. This one was for you." He handed it to me. Not expectantly, just humbly. I took it, but didn't read it. Not yet. "I'm not coming in," he said. "I know." He looked down at the dirt, then back at me. "I was wrong. About everything. And I hope one day you'll believe I see that." Then he walked back to his car. I didn't cry. I didn't chase him. I stood there in the garden long after he left the note in my pocket like a warm stone. Later that night, I read it. It wasn't poetry. It wasn't perfect. But it was honest. And that's more than I'd had in years. I still don't know what comes next for me and Josh. But I'm not standing still anymore. I'm not waiting for an apology to bloom before I start planting again. The second wind is full. So is my heart. And while the ache never fully leaves, it's been replaced by something sturdier, something mine. If you're listening to this and wondering if it's too late to begin again, too late to rebuild, too late to feel like a person again, I want to tell you, it's not. You are not what they left behind. You are what rises anyway. It was spring again. The roses were waking up stubborn and soft. I walked the garden path barefoot one morning, coffee in hand, and realized it had been exactly 1 year since I stood by the roadside in the fog, waiting for my son to unlock the door that never opened. A year, 12 months, 4 seasons, hundreds of tea bags, a dozen houseplants, 42 guests and counting. And I could finally say, with no catch in my throat, that moment didn't break me. It built me. There's a type of strength people don't see until you stop performing pain. Not the kind that comes from shouting your story, but the kind that lets you sit in the middle of it and say, I lived. And I kept going. That's what the second wind became, a monument to continuing. Not forgetting. Not forgiving before it feels real. Just continuing. One evening in early April, I got a booking from a name I hadn't seen in over 20 years. Francis Martin, Leo's cousin, estranged, tough as nails. Hadn't spoken to us since a family argument over inheritance in '03. She checked in wearing black linen silver rings and an attitude that could curdle cream. "You're taller than I remember," she said, standing in my foyer. Like she was still deciding whether I passed inspection. "And you're still allergic to hellos," I replied. She cracked the smallest grin. "Fair. She stayed 3 nights. Didn't say much the first 2. Just read mystery novels by the fire and refused all offers of help with her luggage. But on the 3rd night, she left a small envelope on the kitchen table. Inside was a check. A big one. No note. Just the memo line for what they couldn't see. I stared at it a long time. The next morning, she was gone before dawn. But I knew what that check meant. She had been watching. All this time. And maybe now she saw me for the first time. With that check, I bought new mattresses for both rooms, restocked the pantry, and hired a local woman named Elsie to help with the garden twice a week. "I can't pay much," I told her. She just smiled and said, "I'm not here for the money. I'm here to remember what it feels like to grow something." We understand each other perfectly. In May, an email came from a guest who'd stayed back in November, the one who wrote me the anonymous letter about not wanting to live. She signed this one. "Lauren, I got a job in a new city. I cut off a toxic parent. I'm in therapy. I tell people about you like you're a story they need to hear. To believe again. I'm still here. Because you were." I printed it out and hung it by my desk, next to Leo's napkin, next to Morgan's photo, next to my list of firsts. That's a thing I do now. Keep a list of firsts. The first night I slept through without dreaming of the end. The first time someone called me safe. The first morning I woke up and didn't check my phone to see if Josh had written. The first time I laughed until I had to sit down. The first day I didn't think about what I lost, only what I had. That list gets longer each month, proof that healing doesn't look like one big moment. It's dozens of tiny ones. Quiet, cumulative, unfolding like petals. In June, the local paper wrote a feature about me. The innkeeper who rebuilt her life. One guest at a time. There was a picture. Me in the garden, dirt under my nails, laughing at something else he said off camera. The article made its way around town. People started waving more when I walked to the market. Someone dropped off a pie with no note. Just "thank you," scribbled in frosting. And the guest book, it started filling with things like, "I remembered how to breathe here. You made space for the parts of me no one else wanted. I came here lost. I'm leaving Tinder." And I realized, this is legacy. Not a plaque. Not a brand. Not a sun carrying on your name. Legacy is what lives in the lives you've touched. And in that way, I am immortal. Sometimes I still talk to Leo. I stand in the garden or sit by the window with tea and just speak. I planted hydrangeas by the mailbox I told him last week. They're stubborn, but they're coming around. Other times I say things like, "You'd love Elsie. She swears like a sailor and bakes like an angel." I don't hear his voice back, but I feel something. A warmth. A memory rising like steam. That's enough. One night, I lit a candle by the window and left it burning until sunrise. Not for him, not for Josh, but for me. To remind myself that I am no longer a woman waiting in the dark. I am the light now. If you're still listening to this, if you're sitting in your car or your kitchen or your childhood bedroom thinking, maybe this is it. Maybe I've been forgotten for good. I want you to hear this as clearly as I can say it. You are not forgotten. You are becoming. And the people who couldn't see your worth? That's not a reflection of you. It's a flaw in their vision. Don't let it cloud yours. I don't know how many more chapters this life has for me, but I know this. I'm writing every single one on my own terms now, and it's the best damn story I've ever told. Summer came soft and slow, the kind of heat that curls the leaves, not scorches them. At the second wind, the air smelled like rosemary soil and old books left out in the sun too long. It smelled like memory and peace, and I'd started keeping a ritual. Every Sunday morning before guests woke, I'd brew a single cup of tea, walk barefoot to the edge of the garden, and sit with my back to the rising sun. I didn't pray. I didn't journal. I just was, and that felt like a miracle. One Sunday, a woman checked in with 2 heavy suitcases and a heavier heart. Her name was Adrienne, late 50s, soft voice, said she needed a place to not be strong for a few days. I nodded. You found it. She stayed 4 nights, left the room cleaner than she found it, left me a note folded inside a poetry book. You gave me back the parts of myself I thought I had to outgrow to be respected. I cried when I read it. Since I am aware of that deception, I spent decades living it. The myth that claims you have to give up your tenderness in order to survive. Silence must be that strength. That being older makes one invisible. And there shouldn't be any restrictions on that love if it's genuine. However, I've now unlearned all of it. Instead, here's what I've discovered. You're not too much. You're still in your prime. Just because someone else can't handle your complexity doesn't mean you're disposable. You are free to occupy space. Josh wrote once more. This time, a genuine letter. 2 pages. Just thoughts, no apologies. I believe I mistook Camille's ambition for guidance, he wrote. I believe I surrendered yours without even realizing it since I really needed her approval. I don't think you'll pardon me. However, I want you to know that I am responsible. I always will. I cherish you. When other people made me doubt that love, I just didn't know how to keep it safe. The reading was painful, not because it was mean. However, it was sincere too late. I didn't reply in writing. However, I also didn't rip it up. I gently folded it and put it in the drawer with Morgan's picture and Leo's napkin, and all the additional evidence that my tale didn't conclude as they had anticipated. Occasionally, visitors inquire whether I am a parent. I'm honest. Yes, I did. I still do. We're not close, though. They always appear uncertain as they await a more gentle follow-up. Since some lengths are supposed to be respected, I never offer it, even the painful ones. I threw a brunch one morning for visitors who weren't ready to depart yet. The scent of orange zest and cardamom filled the kitchen. The squeak of the screen door was perfect. Someone said, "It feels like the world is kind here," as a wind blew in. I surveyed the table, distinct faces, various tales and ideas. It didn't make the world kinder. I just stopped allowing cruelty into my life. In August, a writer from a tiny podcast came to visit. She was developing a television show on women who make a fresh start after turning 50. Do you have any desire to tell your story? Last night she inquired about her. I informed her that I had already. She seemed perplexed. I then pointed around us. The rose garden, the weathered porch swing, handwritten notes on a stack, the quiet that allowed for breathing. My narrative is this. Don't use hashtags, no book deal, just a life that improved. If we're still together, perhaps you're listening while taking a peaceful stroll, or by yourself in a once louder kitchen. Perhaps you're attempting to find out what's left of you after someone you loved rejected you. Let me explain. You are the thing that endures, and I wish someone had told me that sooner. Not being turned down, not the falsehoods they forced you to believe, not the shame that attempted to attach itself on your back. You chuckle, your breath, your coffee in the morning, your weary feet, and your kind strength. That remains. Being a mother is no longer necessary for me to be content. I don't need Camille's approval to be important anymore. I don't have to justify why I rebuilt or why I left. Since I didn't depart, I was abandoned. I also didn't pass out. I blossomed. There is now a new space for the second wind. The old tool shed was transformed into a meditation area by Elsie and me. There is hardly enough room for a chair, a plant, and a bookcase. However, many adore it. They spend hours sitting there. Some people cry. Some compose letters that are never delivered. Some people simply breathe. I'm not in very frequently. However, I leave something behind when I do. A quotation, a flower that has been compressed, just a friendly reminder. You're not damaged, you're evolving. Josh may never drive back along this road, but I'm not sure. I doubt Camille will ever realize the harm she caused. I'm not sure if the pain will ever go away entirely. However, I am aware of this. In my personal life, I get out of bed every day, failing to live, not waiting, existing. And that is all there is to it. This is the place to go if you ever get lost. Bring the creaking step to the porch, the flowering garden in any case. These are the chambers that can contain you. You'll locate me, most likely without shoes, most likely humming, most likely thorny with roses. And I'll say, take a breath, while passing you a cup. You succeeded. Since you did, you remain here, and you have only just begun.